So just a little bit about myself. I have a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology degree at the U of S from 2014. I took my Master's of Physical Therapy at the U of S again, 2016. I've been in the golf industry for a while, and more recently, as I've become a physiotherapist, starting to work more as a medical professional within the realm of golf itself. And personally, like I was saying, I've been in the golf industry for a long time. All through high school, I worked at Nevada Bob's as a club fitter and a sales associate. Worked at Moon Lake for a number of years. Met my wife there, actually. We worked the maintenance staff together, and we met out there on the greens. So that's always going to have a special place in my heart. And now we have 2 kids, 7 months old, I think, 7 months old and 2 years old. So growing family, it takes up a lot of time and sometimes can get tough to get out to play. But when I do, it's got to take advantage of it. And then more recently working at the Saskatchewan Golf and Country Club, just maintenance in the summer times, trying to, keep the course in shape. So a little bit of a plan for tonight. As most of you guys are aware, this is really addressing fitness and association to golf, and more importantly, why it's so important, especially nowadays when we're looking at the development that we're seeing within the golf community and the golf world, and how important fitness and body mechanics are, and how they're associated with your body's ability to perform. So we'll go through what exactly golf fitness is. We'll talk a little bit about biomechanics. We'll break into a little bit of a body swing connection, which would be very specific into the TPI model of things. We'll talk about mobility, stability, and motor control. And then we will provide you guys with a little bit of a pre-round warm-up. A lot of people show up to the course with nothing really going and they just start cranking them. So this will give you guys a little bit of a body warm-up more than anything. Okay, so can I shrink this at all? Yeah, that's good. Okay, so golf fitness. Essentially, when we're looking at fitness in general, it has to do with your ability to be able to perform a certain role or task. So simply put, golf fitness is your ability for your body to reach the physical demands required for golfing at an optimal level, including strength, range of motion, stability, and movement control. Essentially, a person's fitness level can be optimized through targeted planning and making sure that we're addressing areas of weakness and concern as they either develop, unfold. As people work with golf professionals, a lot of times we'll start to see common swing characteristics and swing mechanics that are more often a byproduct of how their bodies are moving, and their swing mechanics are evidence of how their bodies are capable of moving. For example, an over-the-top move or a casting move oftentimes has an association with hip rotation issues, and a lot of that stuff can be addressed and targeted to improve. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is about how we go about optimizing golf fitness, or fitness in general, really, but more specifically associated with golf. So some key characteristics or considerations when it comes to training. We got to look at the time of the season that we're in. So either preseason, in-season, and off-season, because each season has its own implications as to what we should be targeting and what our main goals would be. So we'll dive into each kind of what each season would be looking at. We'll talk a little bit about the concepts of progressive overload, making sure that everybody understands that the whole point of training to improve fitness in general is to have an incremental improvement over time. So capability, body capability really comes down to whether or not you're improving your strengths, range of motion, mobility control, all those sort of things on a steady progressive curve. Training experience is another characteristic or consideration to think about when working with golf fitness. Obviously, people who have had some form of training experience in the past, whether it be in a gym setting, in a school setting, specifically with other golf professionals, whatever it might be, understanding where a person lies is important. The age of the individual is also important, whether it's a junior who's just starting or a senior who's having a hard time with, new and aches and pains and stiffnesses going through their bodies. All those things kind of really need to be considered when we're talking about how to optimize one's fitness. And lastly, individual areas of weakness, meaning strength, mobility, stability, motor control. As I mentioned before, a lot of what we do is find a person's area of concern and improve it. So not everybody has, great mechanics or great abilities to move. In fact, I would highly argue that the majority of the best golfers in the world have issues that they learn their body's movements around, and more importantly, they strategically build their bodies to be strong and solidified to work with those problems rather than them become kind of weak links in their ability to swing the golf club. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the time of the season that we're working in. So obviously right now we're in the off season, which, it's pretty straightforward for a lot of people to think, okay, well, what do I do in the off season? Well, some people do nothing. Other people kind of take a direct approach and they think, how can I get better? And what can I do right now to make next year better? That's the approach that I think we should all be taking, whether or not we are, here in Saskatchewan or anywhere else. Obviously in Saskatchewan, we've got quite a small golf season and a hunk of off season that we have to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with our time so that next year when the golf season comes, we're already firing on all cylinders. And in fact, we don't have any work to do because the work's already been done. So off season, our targeted planning is always focused on developing a foundation of strength, increasing muscle mass, and general physical capacity. So basically, essentially building a bigger engine, making that engine more powerful and more ready to produce force when we hit the golf course. So next, what we would look at is kind of in our preseason phase. So basically ramping up to when it's go time. Usually for me, this happens around March, April, May kind of area. What we start looking at is all of the strength and the muscle and the general abilities that we've created during our off-season programming. Now that's where we start thinking, okay, well, I've created this powerful, strong engine. How can I make it apply to golf? And so that's where we start taking kind of more of a focused approach and sport-specific approach to, taking all the strength and the power that we've developed and making it more sport-specific with power, rotation, focus, stability control with rotation, and essentially just making everything we've done become more useful to us as golfers. So essentially put, preseason is the transition from, okay, I've built a big engine. Now, how can I actually fine tune this to work well with golf? And then in the in-season, our main focus really with the in-season switches from, I guess, trying to make improvements or gains in our general fitness, whether that's, muscle mass, strength training, all that sort of stuff. Realistically, our goal in season starts to become focused on performance and making sure that we have what we need throughout the entire year. So we don't necessarily run aggressive training programs, but that doesn't mean we don't do training programs. The training program goals just change from I need to get big, strong, and powerful to I need to retain everything that I've gained and make sure that it's there on the golf course when I ask it to be there. So we start focusing a little bit more on improving kind of some of the mobility, stability requirements, maintaining, more importantly, our mobility and our pliability, because a lot of times what happens is we start to do repetition and repetition and repetition and repetition. We start to see areas of irritation and tightness kick in. As a physiotherapist, that's usually my first, month of golf season is tennis elbows, low back injuries, knee problems, shoulder issues that people haven't been moving in a long period of time. And all of a sudden they go to swing a golf club and they go, holy crap, I got really tight, really stiff, and I don't know what to do with it. So in season, really thinking our focus becomes, let's keep the body moving. Let's make sure that we've got everything firing on all cylinders at all times and really make sure we're recovering. So when we go golfing, we got to make sure that we recover all of our body's mechanics, all of our body's abilities, so that our swing mechanics don't get affected by some of the body breakdown that we might see. Also, if anybody has questions or concerns or anything as we go through this, there's a chat option too. If you guys want to ask questions along the line, feel free to throw some chat questions out. We will have a Q&A at the end as well, but it's sometimes nice to have, if people have any questions along the line, just throw them out there. Okay, so now that we've talked about kind of, I guess, the periodization of the season, meaning what we're doing and when and why we're doing it, now let's talk about the how of what we're trying to do. So how we're trying to make progress and how we're trying to change our bodies and make our bodies adapt is through a process called progressive overload. In a nutshell, this is the whole reason why we train in the first place. We're trying to increase our body's capacity progressively over time. So I'm just going to read this verbatim. Progressive overload is a gradual increase in challenge or demands placed on the body to stimulate adaptation for increasing capacity. So basically, like I was saying, if I want my body to be able to do something, I have to slow and steadily make it be able to do that. Otherwise, we run the risks of, if I'm trying to go from 0 to 100, there's a big gap there in what I'm trying to do. And usually something's going to either present itself as an injury. I'm going to create compensatory patterns just to get the job done, become less efficient and less effective, and ultimately create bad habits. So we want to make sure that as we build with a slow, steady, progressive overload goal. And lots of times that comes down to just understanding where you're currently at the start. So our bodies are supply and demand structures, as I say here. The unique thing we have, because we're biological creatures, we have the ability to adapt to increasing demands that are repeatedly placed on them. If you want a kind of real life example of this right now, currently shoveling snow is a great example of that. The first snowfall of the season, everybody, after they go and shovel snow, they go, oh my God, my body's so sore. I haven't done this type of movement in a long time. My back hurts, my legs hurt, my arms hurt, everything just aches. Well, that's because you haven't done it in a long time. But because the demand during winter is usually fairly high, you've got to shovel often, you got to shovel often, you got to shovel often. Towards the end of the winter season, you kind of start to not recognize how hard it is anymore because your body has progressively adapted to that demand. So our bodies have this ability to, as you challenge them to do something, they have this ability to make adaptations to be able to do that and tolerate it at a better level and become more efficient. So one thing to note, how we go upwards in our abilities comes from something called supercompensation. Okay, so when we apply a stressful stimulus to our body or a workout stimulus to our body, essentially what happens is it recognizes that as a challenge or a threat, if you will. And it tells our body that that was a hard thing to do. And if I want to make sure that I can continue to do this and not have anything kind of hold me back, I need to improve and get better than I was last time. Otherwise, we run the risk of either not being able to do it or getting hurt. So our bodies naturally go through this physiological response, and we have an increased capacity to do something within about 48 to 72 hour window. And we would call that the peak of supercompensation. And so that's where our bodies are most primed and ready for another training stimulus to increase in what we can do. So here's kind of like a breakdown of what that would look like. Okay, you apply your stimulus, which would be your workout. That fatigues your body, it breaks it down, and it kind of makes it go, holy crap, that was hard. And then you need to have a really good, solid recovery. So that includes sleep, hydration, nutrition, managing your stress levels, your recovery. That's active recovery, meaning, flushing out your muscles, foam rolling, stretching, those types of things. If I didn't say nutrition already, nutrition. Making sure that your recovery is totally optimized so that it pushes your body into this state of better than it was before. And then you apply a stimulus again, but this time with a higher challenge, meaning slightly harder, whether that's one more rep, slightly heavier, maybe better body control, right? It's slightly harder than the last one was. And that triggers our body to essentially have an adaptation. Okay, so that makes the strength that we've gained stick, almost like clicking the save button. Okay, so basically, yeah, as I say down here, essentially our next workout that we do after our last one, if we've recovered really well, we should be at a better level, and we're now clicking our save button on how much strength we have achieved or gained out of our last workout. So if you can imagine this, if you work out but don't do anything for a period of time, your body is going to go from a challenge, it's going to have a stimulus, it's going to fatigue, you're going to recover, you're going to supercompensate. But if you don't have a higher stimulus applied at that point in time, your body's just going to naturally go back to what the supply and demand is. So it's going to go back to whatever status quo is, meaning it's going to go back to what it regular needs to be able to do. It's not going to stay, you're not going to click the save button at that newly achieved higher ability. Okay? Here's a little bit of a graph to show that. So the dip downwards, okay, is right here. I think, can I put a pointer view on here? I wonder if I can put a pointer view. Where would I go? Anyway, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but if you're looking right here at the 0 line where the mouse is, you're going to see that would be basically you at today, at this point in time. Okay, that's your ability, that's your capacity. And what we would want to see is that workout that you do challenges your body, right? If it challenges your body, you're going to fatigue from it and it's going to drop you downwards. Okay, that fatigue is going to be what we would call the stress. Okay, now that fatigue level of however hard it is going to drop you a certain distance downwards. Maybe it's going to drop you a little bit, maybe it's going to drop you a lot. But essentially how hard you worked and how hard that challenge was is going to drop you. Then your body's going to go through a recovery period. And that period of time, that's where your body is rebuilding, kind of restoring all of your broken down tissue, making sure that your metabolism is refired up and restoring all of the energy that you depleted. It's going to restore your nervous system. It's going to bring everything back up to where it was. And then it's going to kind of overshoot here a little bit, preemptively thinking, oh, he did that once. I better be careful and I better be ready just in case he does. And so it's going to recover to a period that's slightly higher. Okay. Now, just as I was talking about before, if you don't apply a training stimulus here, your body's just naturally going to drop back down to whatever it used to be. Okay. But if you apply a new training stimulus at that time, it's going to actually do the exact same cycle all over again. And you can see we want to achieve that cycle over and over and over and over, just gradually pushing up that curvature, gradually up and up and up. Okay. This would be essentially a graph of progressive overload. Okay. That's what we're training for. That's the whole reason we work out. It's the whole reason we try to improve on any capacity, whether that's strength, stability, motor control, range of motion. They all follow similar curves like this. They need to have a challenge that gradually pushes them up slowly over time and recover in between. So essentially, progressive overload, the easiest way to look at it is taking small incremental steps to make progress over time and make sure that you actually get where you want to go. Okay, a good example of this on this picture here is if you reach too far, you're eventually going to end up in a place where you can't get that next level. And you're going to come crashing back down and usually land right on your face. And hopefully you have a good physiotherapist to bring you back up. But regardless, if you overshoot, what we end up seeing is that you can't go any farther. You have something that's holding you back, something that's stopping you from progressing. And usually that's where a lot of people either end up quitting, getting hurt, or getting frustrated and trying to do something different. So this over here, the smaller steps ladder, is a good example of what we would want to see. Small, slow, and steady incremental increases gradually over time. This is the classic tale of the tortoise and the hare. Okay, so that's a very, very in-depth look at essentially how we expect to make gains in our fitness. Now, let's talk a little bit more about some of those considerations that we were talking about in what we also have to think about. So a person's training experience is a big factor here, because a person's relative ability, meaning where their current starting point is, plays a big role in how hard or how aggressive or what kind of things we should be doing. Because somebody who is a beginner is going to learn, or is going to have a lot of basic fundamental learning to do in how to control their body, how to essentially move, how to see what balance and stability looks like, get really good at, we call it proprioception, but the biggest way to put it is feeling what their body's doing in space. The biggest difference between an experienced or an advanced fitness level person and a beginner fitness level person is their ability to feel what their body's doing. Because the more you can actually feel what your body's doing, the better you can do at changing and going for what you actually want it to move like. So control is a big component missing in a lot of beginners. And it's hard working with juniors lots of times because they come in so ready and fired up to go and lift the heavy weights and move and prove to their buddies that they're stronger than them and all this other stuff, when there's this foundation of control that a lot of them are missing right off the get-go. My apologies. Siri's talking to us. But regardless, what I would look at with juniors right out the gates is they're usually just going through a growth spurt. They're just learning how to control their bodies. And ultimately, some of them have done training in the past and some of them haven't. So if they've already built up a foundation of how to move, and a really good one, sometimes those younger juniors are ready to move on quicker than some of the very beginners who have never ever done anything. So understanding where a person's at in their experience levels is really important to make sure that their long-term success happens. Otherwise, we run into situations like this where you have a junior who's really experienced, already way up the one ladder, and then another one who just showed up to the party way down below, trying to catch up to that buddy way up top and not really doing it in the proper way. So experience level and being able to pull the reins back and hold somebody back when they need it and push them forwards when they're ready for it is a really big component of this. Something I comment on here is newbie gains. Some people have heard of newbie gains, some people have not. Essentially what newbie gains are is when somebody's just fresh into doing something, they're going to see a larger amount of progress right off the bat, simply because they're going through a lot of that learning curve progression, right? Where they're just learning how to move better and control their bodies better and essentially have control more efficiently. They're not necessarily making physiological muscle mass or strength gains per se. They're just learning how to control things better. And we'll often see a large jump in their abilities really quickly, simply because they're progressing quick. So age considerations, again, thinking about age, don't only think about juniors, but think about older adults, think about everybody under the sun. Somebody who's a junior and somebody who's a senior who's retired, they're going to have different fitness goals. They're going to have different fitness abilities. They're going to have a lot of difference in what they can do and what they can't do. But when we're looking at age considerations, one thing we have to really make sure is that the fitness goals that we're going after or that we're trying to progressively achieve match where this person's coming from. Okay, so as I kind of commented, learning how to control foundational movement patterns as a young age has been shown to influence body awareness and result in improved physical performance of youth, junior, and young adult athletes. So the sooner you can start training your body how you want it to move and teaching it and feeling how you want it to move, the more successful you're going to be able to actually produce what you're trying to do. And this creates a much more coachable athlete for sure when it comes to working with golf professionals like Steve or any of the other PGA of Saskatchewan professionals, working with anybody who's going to be working on, I need you here, I need you doing this with your swing. Think about getting your hips through all those types of things where they might be giving you, feel this, look at this, do this. If you haven't taught your body how to control that stuff yet, some of those changes might become very hard to achieve, which is why it's so important to really focus on improving what you need to improve and then take that to the table when you're working with your golf coach. So as we kind of talked about a more coordinated and bodily aware golfer will be much more trainable or coachable, because it can actually improve their abilities to achieve what they want, what their golf coach wants out of them. So looking at age and skill level, appropriate training, like I said, whether or not you are training specifically for golf, you need to make sure that it's appropriate for what the person in front of you is for. So for me, example, I'm working with a ton of juniors and a ton of pros, and I'm working with a ton of seniors. I have to meet them where they're at. Sometimes it's holding things back, sometimes it's pushing things forwards, but ultimately it comes down to you know, where they're at age-wise, where they're at physical ability-wise, and just meeting them where they're at. One thing to note here, when it comes to general fitness, general training is much more of a priority than sports-specific training the younger the individual is. Okay, so sometimes I've got some 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds that I'm working with right now, 13, 14, you know, all the way, the whole age range. But when we're looking at these 10-year-olds, we're not necessarily really honing in and focusing a ton on golf per se. We're teaching them how to move better. We're teaching them how to control their bodies better first. A general training program and a general idea of how to move is more important than sport-specific training for a younger individual. But as they progress, obviously, if they start to move more efficiently, more effectively, and with better control, we can start introducing some of the more advanced versions of sport-specific training. And that's where we would get into a lot of some of the TPI, or Titleist Performance Institute, specific drills and exercises and stuff targeted towards golf itself. Okay, so addressing areas of weakness. This is, again, where we're talking about the individual specific things that we need to consider. Everybody's got different strengths, stabilities, mobilities, and motor control abilities. Okay, my job as a physiotherapist is oftentimes to assess and figure out where those are. Okay, to figure out where the biomechanical limitations and inabilities are, so that we know how to and what to address and create a plan to do that. So addressing these types of things, or more importantly, pointing them out, gives us the ability to make sure that we're actually going in the right direction. Going back to this ladder here, one thing you always want to make sure, think about climbing an actual ladder. Well, if you get to the top of the ladder and then you turn around and you look down and you go, well, this isn't where I wanted to be. Well, you probably had your ladder against the wrong wall in the first place, right? You want to make sure that when you are training, you're actually going in the direction that you're trying to go. Because if you put in all of this work and you change all of these things and it doesn't actually improve a person, there's a big problem. You got to make sure that the things you're trying to do are actually leading to where you want to go. There's no sense in climbing a big, tall ladder if it's on the wrong wall that you didn't want to climb in the first place. Okay, so I did talk a little bit about biomechanics back there. And so I just wanted to touch base about what that word means. And essentially, when it comes to a physiotherapist or a fitness professional or a golf professional, the essential idea of biomechanics becomes one that we kind of talk about, but nobody really ever dives into. Oh, I just see I got a question here. Let's see. For kids in smaller centers, what kind of programs online can they follow for the best general exercise programs for the age group? Assuming they're in general shape, I want to get stronger without losing flexibility and mobility. Okay, so yeah, Jeff, I'm not too sure of any direct online programs. Are you thinking like sport specific or just general specific?
Hi there. Yeah, no, I was just thinking there's a lot of kids that I work with that aren't able to get into seeing someone with your background. I do definitely have some that are, for sure, but I'm just curious about the ones that don't, that can access information and start working out in the smaller centers where there isn't TPI experts or along that line. So I'm just thinking online, like there's a lot of different workout programs. And I just want to make sure that, just as you had said, it's more adequate for their age group. As an example, when I was doing my workout a few years ago, I followed a Nike, it was on Nike Online, and it was a Nike workout segment. And I went to the gym and I ended up hurting myself because it wasn't for me. And I just want to make sure that doesn't happen to the kids. So just wondering what kind of opportunities they have, or do you offer online where you can assess without being right in front of you? Do you have those options?
Yeah, awesome. Great question. So yes, you're 100% right. As we're talking about the appropriateness level of a person's training program, that's a great example of going down the path of, climbing the ladder, but you realize you're on the wrong wall. Essentially, the way I would address this is for myself, I actually have a ton of out of province clients that I do work with, or not necessarily out of province, but out in the rural community. And so there are abilities to do video-based sessions and then online programs with myself. Now, I'm not the only one that's capable of doing this, but if we're looking at, an area within the province, there are, in Regina, we've got Sean Lamb. He's a TPI certified chiropractor, and he works very closely with a lot of the golf community out there. In Humboldt, we've got Matthew Kelly. He's a TPI certified physiotherapist as well out in Humboldt. I'm not too sure out in the Swift Current area or out further that direction, but I think one of the big things would be is if you have somebody, I guess, essentially close, it's worthwhile going to them for at least an assessment. Now, if that's not possible, there are the abilities to do assessments video based. It's just much, much harder as a physiotherapist or someone looking for these very specific weaknesses or inabilities. It's harder to do that when I can't challenge a stress test, essentially. But it's still possible. The TPI model effectively uses a lot of this with some of their professionals. So you better believe that, sometimes these professional players are out practicing, doing whatever, and then their coaches across the country are not even in the same hemisphere, and they're going to be messaging and communicating lots back and forth to adjust and fine tune programming and figure out where they need to go. And we do the same thing kind of once the program is set. The ability to adjust and fine tune has gotten much, much better with technology, the ability to take video of a movement mechanic and essentially everything that you can see from a video perspective. Again, like I said, without having the ability to stress test somebody and, challenge their certain abilities with my own physical hands, sometimes there are limitations. But that's why I would say if you have the ability, even if it's, a one-off assessment, to just get in and have somebody really hone in on, okay, where's your areas of major weaknesses, major concern, and pick the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. You're always going to see more success having that. But like I said, there are abilities to do video-based assessments. So either emailing myself or touching base with any of the other TPI professionals that I mentioned before.
Thank you very much. That's that's good. It's very fair that people can access them from anywhere. It was the regular going in once a week is not realistic for many of them. So the fact that you make that one-off trip in to see somebody, that's fantastic. And I'm sure Steve can come up with a list of all the guys that he would recommend in all the different parts of the province for us. So I look forward to seeing that and then getting more of my kids involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely probably put out a list. I know we've been making one. I don't think we've officially released it or launched it yet, but we've definitely got a list of people that we've been kind of thinking about in the province to really hone in and kind of catch Saskatchewan up essentially in where we're at in terms of the golf community and the junior development. We're on the rise for sure, but I still feel like we got some catching up to do.
100%.
Oh, and we've got Chris of course we got Chris out in Moose Jaw. Yeah, there's a lot of guys out there that are highly qualified professionals. And like I said, myself, I constantly send people to the people in the areas that I know are trustworthy and talking and doing exactly talking the talk and walking the walk, just like we're talking about tonight. Okay, so biomechanics. I started talking about this, but essentially, like I was saying, people throw the word biomechanics around and don't really look at what it actually means. So the easiest way to understand biomechanics is thinking about it as the way you move is just like a mechanical structure, okay? You're going to move in the easiest path, okay? So whether you have an area of stiffness, an area of tightness, or an area of weakness, you're essentially going to move in whichever way your body moves without resistance, essentially. And so when we're looking at this, think about your body as a mechanical structure, like a crane or a bulldozer, if you will, or anything along those lines. Make something that's mechanical. Essentially, for those structures to function properly, they need to have parts and pieces working kind of in like a gears-like mechanism where things need to be lined up, functioning well at the right place at the right time in order for the system to work, okay? So let's just consider if we had somebody who had, let's just say, a tightness, and that tightness pulls their gears into a position where they don't just necessarily line up as good anymore. We're going to see some binding in that system, and eventually sometimes we'll see either a change in movement to move around that in a funny way, or we're going to see injury produce itself, or we're going to see, I guess, loss of sequence, meaning they start avoiding that direction altogether. But essentially something like that, a tightness is going to make your path of least resistance a little bit more out of whack, okay? If we have somebody who has an instability or a weakness, we might see them collapse into themselves a little bit more. And same kind of thing. We're going to find them moving in ways that aren't very inducive of high quality mechanical movement. Okay, so thinking about biomechanics as how our bodies essentially stay stacked, aligned, and move well to produce force consistently in a specific order and avoid injury. Okay. Then the cool thing about our bodies is they are not just machines, okay? The whole word bio means that we're adaptable, right? As I talked about before, we can challenge our bio machines to change. We can make our path of least resistance different. We can improve how we move so that our path of least resistance becomes more effective, becomes more efficient, and puts us in positions that are more appropriate for golf. And so everybody's got their own limitations. You know, if you think about John Rahm, for example, he was talking recently about how his club feet at birth made his golf swing change. So when he was playing through his early college years and everything, he used to have a full swing. And that was one of the things that they saw, is that mechanically he just couldn't control that much range of motion because of his lower extremities, because of his feet. And so what they started to look at is changing his body swing to match his swing to match his body's ability. So we call that the body swing connection. We always want the person's swing to match the person's body's abilities. Yes, their body's abilities can be changed, but for in a case like John Rahm, where it's a birth defect, they had to change the swing to match the body. And so that's where you start seeing his, shortened swing become more prominent, especially with his bowed wrist. Again, he talks about how his wrists have lots of mobility going one way, not very much the other. So he tends to go into that power position so that he can generate more speed and more power with a short swing. So that's a good example of how the body influences what the swing should look like, and vice versa, how the body can change to make the swing different. So that's essentially what biomechanics means. It's how you put your body into certain positions and how you control that. Oops, I'm stuck here. Okay, so another good example. Phil, he's been talking a lot about recently how recent he's felt his body's moving more efficient and more effective than it has in many, many years, simply because he's caring more about the little things in his mechanics. So not his swing mechanics, but his body's mechanics. And so he's been working a lot with TPI certified therapists and fitness professionals to improve his body's capacity and to improve his body's mechanics so that he can perform efficiently and effectively on repeat. And as you know, as of last year, he was the oldest PGA Championship champion. So that's a good example of how biomechanics, no matter how old you are, no matter how young you are, they can be influenced and they can be improved. So how did he do it? Number one, he started a strength training program with TPI certified professionals that are really directed and targeted towards his areas of concern, like we talked about before. That's one of the big things we look at. What do you need to specifically work on? He did speed training and power training programs to improve. Once his mechanics were better, he wanted to make his capacity better, right? So we talked about building a bigger engine and making it more powerful so that it can actually produce what he's trying to do. Making sure that the mobility during golf season and leading up to golf season is in check, so that when you take that big engine and you start producing force with it, you've also got the steering and the brakes to control the system. Otherwise, you're just going to be smashing into the wall. So you want to have a good, powerful, strong engine, but also the ability to control it. And so, like we said, there's no way he can do this without a team of professionals behind him, such as his fitness professionals, his swing coach, his nutritionist, his psychologist, his equipment fitting team with Callaway, you name it. All of those components of what he can do are a part of how he's doing what he's doing. So as I talked about, making sure that you're moving well helps you prevent injury and also make sure that you can produce the best that you possibly can out on the golf course. So you always want to make sure you check yourself before you wreck yourself. I don't remember where that saying ever came from, but I love it and I'm always going to stick to it. There's nothing like a good old fashioned saying that sticks in your head. Any good sayings on your end? No? Okay. Tee it high and let it fly. Something like that. Yeah, that's a good one too. Okay, so moving on, just a little bit of an idea of where we see lots of injuries happen in golf. This is again from my physiotherapy perspective more than anything. A lot of areas of weakness and concern end up showing up in the elbow, the low back, and mostly the shoulder. So low back, elbow, shoulder, wrist, I'd say those are the four big ones that I see consistently. Right at the beginning of golf season, tons of this stuff shows up. And it's usually because nobody did anything in the off season to really care about actually improving. And then they go and tee it high and let it fly, and they fly right into my clinic. So that's usually what happens. So the reason this happens is usually because of something I'll call the capacity conundrum. Basically, if you don't use it, you lose it. So thinking about it like this, if you do less, you can't do as much. So you do even less. Because you're doing even less, you do even less. Because you're doing even less. And it's just this downward spiral. And essentially, it's kind of like negative compounding interest on debt. For any of the juniors watching right now, that's something you don't want. You would love compounding interest in the positive direction, not the negative direction. So yeah, if you don't use it, you lose it. So here's a visual representation of that. Golf season ends, you stop golfing, you lose the capacity to golf, winter kicks in, it gets cold, you don't get outside, you don't do as much, winter break kicks in, people eat a bunch of junk, sit around drinking beverages, generally detrain, you get a minor injury because you try to go back to doing things and you set a New Year's resolution, you get hurt, that pain stops you from functioning, you become even more sedentary and stop moving around even more, and then all of a sudden you're in this position where you're going, how the heck did I get here? And then, like I talked about before, this is reversible, right? You can rebuild just like that curve upwards graph of progressive overload. You just got to do it one step at a time. Recognize where you're at and start making your way back up. So this is where off-season stuff really kicks in. You make sure you're prepping your body as best as you physically can. Like I talked about before, you always want to make sure you emphasize your off-season programming to be going in the direction that you want it to go. If you're in the off-season and you're not necessarily trying to improve your conditioning for what you want, you're not going to get what you want out of it. And you'll go to the golf season next year and you'll kind of go, well, how come I'm no better? I'm not stronger, I'm not more efficient, my body doesn't move as good. Chances are you're probably not going to see fruitful gain if you don't make it go up the right wall. So always go back to put your ladder on the right wall if you want to climb it in the right direction. And I just like these pictures. I don't know why I love that potato shaving his six pack. There's something about, I just had kids, so my six pack's definitely potato shavings. We've already talked about this. I don't need to get into too much detail, but again, how do you figure out what your biomechanical problems are? A professional who can actually help you assess and determine those. So one of the things we look at is if your biomechanics, like I said, if your biomechanics aren't working well, your swing mechanics will be affected. And you need to make sure that you have both of those things going in connection, because your body creates what you can swing like. Okay, so this is more of like I guess a tidbit that I think a lot of people misunderstand what mobility and stability roles have in our bodies. And lots of times you'll see people, they'll say something hurts and they'll instantly just go stretch it. Or they'll see, my hip flexors feel tight, or this feels tight, and they'll instantly try and go and stretch it. Well, lots of times what the problems aren't actually mobility or tightness or flexibility issues. They are motor control problems where they just physically can't control and turn off the muscles and turn on the muscles appropriately for what they're trying to do. So like I said here, sometimes creating more movement isn't the answer, but controlling more movement is. So if we're thinking about what flexibility is, okay, flexibility is the passive range of motion or a willingness of your body's tissues to change length based on the demands that you're applying on them. So this is kind of like a stretchiness. How much pliability and glide do they actually have within them? When we're looking at mobility, we're looking at the active control of that, meaning whether or not you can physically take it to those positions. Okay, so for example, if I had somebody lift my arm above my head, that would be a passive range of motion. If I lift my arm above my head, that's an active range of motion. Okay, whether or not I can control that is determining my mobility, my ability to access those range of motions. If I was looking at my flexibility, it would be, hey, Steve, lift my arm. Oh yeah, you've got the ability to, but you can't control it. Okay, that's where we're talking about, you've got this big engine, but you've got no steering or brakes. So sometimes more movement isn't the answer, it's control of more movement that the answer is. John Rahm, great example of that. More movement, more swing, bigger range was not the answer. Control of what he's currently got and better control of what he's got is the answer. Now, stability is our ability to stay in position while force is applied to us. Okay, so when we're swinging, sometimes what we'll see is instability or the inability to resist change while our body's functioning. So you'll see sway and a slide, you'll see early extension, you'll see loss of shoulder plane. All of those things are changes in position while force is being applied. So stability is a huge part in the golf swing because it needs to be able to generate power through from our feet, through our bodies to our club. Basically head to toe, it's got to get right through you. And if you can't maintain stability while that's happening, you're going to have ball trajectories going all over the place because you're never going to be consistent in the right place at the right time. So mobility and stability have an interchanging role within our bodies. Okay, from the feet up, we're just going to talk about this. At the floor is the most stable thing you can be on. Okay, so you're going to have the foot being the most stable structure. Just above that, you're going to have the ankle, and that's got to be mobile. Okay, just above that, then you're going to have the knee, and that's got to be something that's stable and not collapsing or diving on you. Then up into the hip, you're going to have mobility, where you have the ability to rotate, twist, and turn. Okay, up above that, you're going to have the low back, which is designed to just basically ride on top of the hips. It's not supposed to turn. It's just going to go for a ride in rotation. Then you're going to have the mid back where it's supposed to turn. Okay, that's mobility. And then you're going to have the the lower neck, which is supposed to be stable to create that stability of your body's head and not having it all over the place on. Keeping your head in one position, as a lot of professionals will say, is not necessarily the end of the world, but it's being able to make sure that that's not all over the place, but more likely controlled ability for that. So thinking about it, you need to have all of those series of joints and abilities doing their job, creating mobility or stability, whatever their job is. And if they're not, you've got a mechanical problem. And that chair. He's had a few too many. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so improving all of this comes down to working on everything we just talked about. You need to optimize your body's mechanics so that you can gain control, power, and accuracy. Okay, making sure that you're taking that to your golf swing is the next important thing. Okay, what good is my job if you actually don't go work with somebody who's actually going to teach you how to actually fine tune a now well moving body? Okay, so I use a race car example for this. My job is to put the car together in good working order, and a golf professional or teaching professional's job is to take that and fine tune it to make sure that everything's firing at the right time, at the right place, and firing on all cylinders. Okay, so again, my job, make you move better with better control, better power, better strength, and then take that and make it work with golf really well. Okay, so make sure you team up with your local golf professionals, your teaching professionals, your swing coaches, and really get dialed in with everything that you're creating. Otherwise, it becomes pretty fruitless gain if you're not taking that and applying it to golf. So I'm sure Golf Saskatchewan's got a large list of people that can be of service for this type of thing. So always look out and reach out to Steve for any advice or guidance on where to go if you're not already working with somebody. Okay, so bringing a full circle. First things first, if you want to improve your performance, you got to improve your body. Then you got to improve your swing. Then you got to improve how you use that on the course. So your course management, your decision making, that's with a sports psychologist and playing lessons with a coach. And ultimately, if you put it all together, you're going to improve your score. Okay, so it's not necessarily one piece of this that makes you a better golfer or improve your performance. It's all of those things together. Each one has its own vital role in creating a good golfer. So I'm not going to dive into detail about this, but every assessment that I do for golf goes through the TPI Assessment Screen. Okay, and this is how I really pull out those low-hanging fruit. So for example, Jeff, this would be what I would take someone through when they come to me for one of those one-off assessments. I would really go through this and hone in on, okay, here's what's moving, here's what's not, here's stable, this is immobile. These are the things that we're finding. Okay, this is the plan that we have to start working on to improve these low-hanging fruit. And then we can kind of get more specific as we start addressing some of these areas of concern. And after we've gone through the assessment, the next step is actually creating a program and a plan, and then always adapting that program and plan as change is needed. A program, as we talked about, progressive overload is the only way to get better. And if I give you a program and we don't progressive overload and we don't adjust and adapt and change things as your body gets better, all of a sudden you hit a plateau and you're not changing anymore. So following up and progressing and progressively overloading the plan is essentially how you make progress. I already talked about this. I don't do swing analysis. I am not a swing coach. I'm not a golf professional. I am a physical professional. I am a fitness professional. I look at how the body moves and improve that. Working with a golf professional is where we're going to really dive into the swing mechanics and make that byproduct of how your body's functioning become applicable in golf. This is just an overview of what my assessment screen looks like. Again, if you want any more of this kind of at a base level, you can always reach out to me for a phone call and we can talk a little bit more too. So now that you've got all this information from a TPI screen, you kind of might be like this guy and go, what the heck do I do, right? I don't have this moving. This is stiff. This is tight. This is unstable. I don't know what to do. Well, really, that's where my direction and my guidance really kicks in. So it's all fine and dandy for me to say your hips don't turn or your ankle's stiff or your shoulder's weak or whatever it might be. But planning to change that is really important. A lot of times, sometimes, like I said, people will hear something like something's stiff or something's tight, and they'll instantly go to stretch it. Whereas sometimes it's actually a weakness somewhere else that's not creating the support or the stability for that tissue to be free to function where it should. A good example of this would be if I took this water bottle and I held it in this hand, and then somebody came along and they gave me another drink that I was supposed to try and drink with this hand. Well, this is already functioning. It can't let go. This would be the definition of a neurological tightness. It's already being asked to do something it's really hard for me to try and do something else when I'm already working so hard. So that would be, for example, if my hip is really, really, really stiff, trying to stabilize my knee because I have a weak hip, then all of a sudden I do not have the ability to rotate on it as well. So we would all of a sudden be looking at, well, the problem isn't necessarily a tight hip, it's a weak hip. We need to improve the strength of that so that it becomes free to function properly. So it's really important to make sure that we're going in the right direction. Sometimes people have restrictions and biomechanical restrictions that are stiffnesses, tightnesses, or previous injuries, scar tissues, whatever you name it. Sometimes physiotherapy is actually required, where someone needs to get on my treatment table and I need to kind of make things move a little bit better. So sometimes there is a component of, all right, this just needs to get moving. Steve's a good example of this. I got to beat him up. He gets on my table, we beat him up. Stab him with a few needles here and there, and we beat him up. We were dry needling his elbow the other day, and he was cursing at me. So that would be a good example of sometimes physiotherapy is a requirement to make those mechanics move better, and then it becomes kind of your baby to take care of. And I point, here's where you need to go. This is the stuff you'd start doing on your own. Okay, so sometimes there's physio involved, including manual therapy, which is hands-on treatment. Okay, so we call it soft tissue release, which would be like very close to massage, deep tissue stuff. Some neurological or motor control planning, where we're giving your body feedback of how to move. General stretching, where you just lay down and I stretch you. A lot of those things all come down to me trying to influence your body's ability to change and adapt to what we need it to do. So one of the things we look at is, like I talked about, the path of least resistance. If a person has treatment, but then doesn't actually go and do any of the exercises that we also prescribe, the treatment becomes pretty fruitless again, because now all of a sudden you just go back to old habits. Your old path remains your easiest one, and you won't really see any change or gain in your body's ability. So you have to make sure that any manual therapy or passive treatment that you have, such as chiro, massage, physio, whatever it might be, where someone's doing something to you, there's got to be an equal component that you have to keep that movement. So I always tell my patients, anything that I do is basically me giving them a momentum push, and it's up to them to stand behind it and just keep nudging it along with the exercises that keeps things moving in the right direction and essentially clicks the save button. So keep up with all of your homework whenever you're prescribed homework. Okay, so training programs. One thing I wanted to talk about with this is, again, once we get into training side of things, this is where it becomes your really main goal to make sure we're going in the right direction. One thing that we're looking at with training programs through Gulf Saskatchewan is through the junior development program, where we are offering, the TPI assessments as an extraneous variable. It's not a part of the junior development program, but it's something that if you want to come to me for an assessment to know, okay, well, where are my low-hanging fruits? What are my weaknesses? What are my stiffnesses? What are my tightnesses? How do I know this stuff? An individual assessment is required, okay? If you are wanting to just kind of take everything at a generalist perspective, where you're looking at, okay, well, I just want to improve my general ability to control my body, my general ability to move better. That's definitely something that's valuable in doing. But sometimes people might have that one-off, my wrist is a problem, or my hip is a problem, or something else is a problem. In those cases, we definitely need to find those areas of concern, okay? So through Gulf Saskatchewan, we are doing that developmental junior program every second week. Yeah, starting on the 15th, we are doing training programs at my clinic, and that's a part of the junior development program. So if you have bought in or paid into the junior development program, you are invited to participate in that. If you are looking to get more into kind of the individual, figure out things, and also work on the junior development program, that would be something where you would reach out to me and we can set up an appointment for a more direct assessment. So I am going to give you guys a pre-round warm-up. This is kind of getting towards the end of our session here. So what I want to make sure is that I'm actually visible in the screen's view so you can see me. Oops. So one thing that I will mention is that if anybody wants videos to these exact exercises and everything, my email is going to be at the end of this presentation. Just shoot me an email and I will send you a link to something called My TPI. And what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to access videos and everything right through there. And I can upload them and send them to you. So if you want them in the future, you can always look at them. I'm going to take you guys through these breakdowns for a good pre-round warm-up. Sometimes people like to do the pre-round warm-up at home before they leave. Depends on how far you are from the course. Find a space in the pro shop, do some of this out there. Lay out a towel on the driving range, do it out there. Or if you really, really want to, hop on the first tee and do them there. So where you do them, I don't care, but should you be doing them? Absolutely. You never want to get to a place and have your body not really firing on all cylinders and then blow something up. You want to make sure that everything's moving loosey-goosey and ready to fire, okay? So we're going to go through a forearm on wrist mobility stretch. So the first thing that we'll do, you can do this along with me, is you're going to straighten your elbow straight out and you're going to grab your fingers and curl them under, okay? So your elbow should be nice and straight. Your fingers should be curled under, just like that. And you're just going to pull that fingers and wrist backwards. Now from here, you can turn your wrist sideways like this or upside down, as long as your elbow keeps straight. Each one of those progressions is a little bit more intense. So this is the easy one. This is medium. This is more intense. Okay. So you would hold this and take really, really, really nice relaxing breaths for about 10 relaxing breaths. Okay. Then you would shake that out, do the other one. Okay. The next one is a wrist extension stretch. So there's a few ways to do this one. You can do grab the hand, push the elbow out. You want to make sure that your fingers are holding right at the base there, not just in the fingertips. That can get a little bit stressful on the joint. So grab the whole kind of bottom of the palm and pull that backwards. Again, elbow being straight. Okay, that's one version. Another version is on a surface, taking and putting your elbow like this and stretching it down that way. Okay, that's a more aggressive version, and you can lean backwards into this one for a deeper stretch. Again, the elbow's got to be straight here. Okay, so that would be some wrist mobility stuff to kind of get everything loosey-goosey and ready for you on that tee. Now, the next thing would be a shoulder rotation. I don't have a golf club, but I do have this. So all you need is a golf club for this one. You're just going to place your hand in a position as if you're a waiter or a waitress in a restaurant. Put your golf club on the outside of your elbow and just kind of hold it with your fingers there. And then from here, you're rotating that into a rotation outwards. Okay, so from the side, this is what it looked like, just rotating out. From the front, I'm spinning my elbow or spinning my hand outwards just by leveraging here. Now with this one, obviously you don't want to go cranking too hard on this. Okay, this is one that can be a little bit stiff and a little bit tight, especially with everybody's postures being rounded forwards these days. This is one that you want to kind of go, give it a nice challenge, but nothing too aggressive. Again, hold that for 10 breaths. Next one, we are looking at a thoracic spine rotation. So you guys can see me here. Okay, so this one's really good. You just get into golf width or golf stance. You're going to take one hand in this position in a kind of a 90-degree angle, and you're going to put that right between your two knees. Okay, right between your two knees. And from here, you're going to squeeze that elbow and the hand together, and you're going to rotate your chest up and open, back down, up and open. Okay, you would do 10 on that side and 10 on the other side. Okay, that is called the A-frame stretch. A less advanced or chiller version, if you will, would be a side lying rotation. I don't know if you can see me here, but you probably can. Yeah, good. So in this position, you're just going to lay with your knees at 90 degrees. Okay, you're going to take your hand on your ribs and you're going to roll your chest open. Breathe in, breathe out, open up. You can add the arm up and over for a stretch. That's a little bit more advanced again. So you've got a few different options for that there as well. Next, for our hip control and getting our hips firing, one of my favorites, I like it for a few reasons. Golf, each leg fires kind of individually at certain parts. So we need to have the ability to weight shift. Okay, we need to have that ability firing properly. We also need to have the ability to control the stability of our pelvis so that our low back doesn't start taking a bunch of different torques. Okay, so the exercise we do here is something called a bridge march. So everybody's probably heard of a bridge before, but a bridge is just lifting and scooping your butt up, okay, up off the floor. What it's not is pushing your back and arching your back. Okay, so think about it like scooping your bum up off the floor. Then from here, hold your bum up, and you're just going to take little tiny marching steps and really prevent your pelvis from twisting. Okay, so that's just going to be, again, practicing that weight shift, getting everything firing weight shift wise. And it's also going to be really focusing on controlling what your pelvis is doing, because you don't want to let it dip and dive. You're going to hold it stable while your legs fire. So that's our bridge and pelvis and glute control exercise. The last one for hip rotation is our 90-90 swivel. There's a few degrees of this one. You can start in this position here, swivel down, touch the knee, swivel down, touch the knee. Okay, just going back and forth, really making sure that your pelvis isn't going way rotated. Try and keep your shoulders square in front of you. Okay, you can get more aggressive into this by going into an upright 90-90 and leaning forwards. Okay, you can go this direction, this direction, this direction, and just work your way through each position, taking a breath in each position. Okay, so those are more advanced versions, and then you can swivel over and do the same on the other side. So that's a really good way to ensure that your body is really working in a way that it needs to be to fire on all cylinders when you get to the course. So again, like I said, doesn't necessarily have to be anything fancy. It's just got to be something that gets all components of your body firing where they need to go. I'm not going to get into this. This is just some of the golf services I provide. I have assessments, packages, and then memberships. And everybody who's attending tonight gets the honorary Golf Saskatchewan discount. So just make sure if you do plan to book an assessment with myself, that you let the clinic know that you attended the webinar, and they will honor this price for us for our assessment. If you do want to chat with myself a little bit more, by all means, definitely give me a shout. Email me. Here's my email down here. Give me a shout. Happy to talk golf, happy to talk fitness, happy to talk anything at any point in time. So I think that's kind of everything that I wanted to get through tonight. If anybody's got any questions, comments, fire away.